G'day, 5th of April 2026, we have arrived. Call it Easter Sunday. My name's Louie. I'm here to present to you today's message of hope. I want to tell you about Jerry Selbee. Well, he stood in a car park in Evatt, Michigan, and read a lottery brochure. 3 minutes later, he found something the state lottery designers apparently hadn't anticipated. Now, the lottery game was called Windfall. Most lotteries work the same way. That is, the jackpot builds until someone wins it all. But with the Windfall, it had a twist. If the jackpot reached $5 million and nobody matched all 6 numbers, well, the money didn't sit there. It rolled down, spread across the lower tier winners. What a good bonus. So the people who match 3, 4 or even 5 numbers suddenly received dramatically higher payouts. So under those conditions, if you bought enough tickets, guess what? I think you've worked it out. The mathematics tipped in your favor. So this is not about gambling, it's purely arithmetic. Now, Jerry had a mathematics degree from Western Michigan University. So he'd done the calculations standing in the car park before he reached his car. He thought to himself, invest $1,100 and expect roughly $1,900 back. And that's around 80% return. Pretty good. Now, he and his wife Marge had run a convenience store on Main Street for 17 years. So it was just in that town, one traffic light, the population was 1,900 people. And of course they sold up in the early 60s with no real plan. Now Jerry had found something though, because they played and they won the lottery. Eventually they drove 900-mile round trips to Massachusetts when Michigan shut the game. And they were staying at a Red Roof Inn, sorting out tickets by hand for 10 hours a day, non-stop. They grossed more than $26 million across 9 years. That's a pretty good work, right? Happens to be the state inspector launch and a full investigation expecting organized crimes and the likes of it. But what he found instead was a retired couple from a small town applying basic arithmetic. How's that for a story? Of course, before I go further, I'm not recommending the lottery to anyone. That's not where this is going to. It's not. Because here is the thing about a loophole. It depends entirely on what you do with it. Think about that. Now, the film based on Jerry and Marge's story introduces a character, a university student, Tyler, who also finds the same mathematical quirk. It's the same game, same roll down, same numbers. But Tyler's intention is different. He wants all of it for himself. Hear those things before? Me, myself, and I. Yep, that's what Tyler had. And in the film, he plans to get by hacking into Jerry's account and triggering a roll down on his own terms. There's no stopping of people thinking of evil day and night, is there? I can tell you, in the movie it shows Tyler doesn't end up in a good place. And I want to hold that image besides Jerry's for a moment. 2 people, same information, same loophole, but one builds something that helps his family, his friends, and his town. Good on him. The other, completely opposite. The other reaches for more than his share through deception, and it dearly cost him. Now, the Apostle Paul writes to Timothy about exactly this. You'll find it in the 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 9. But those who decide to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. A snare, not a fine. Not a setback, but ruin and destruction. And that is not gentle language, and Paul doesn't mean it gently. The desire to be rich, well, not wealth itself, but the desire for it as an end, it's simply described as a trap that closes around people, well before they realize they've stepped into it. As you can see in the movie, Tyler stepped into it, alright? The desire wasn't the money itself, it was actually the need to have it all. You hear the word greed here? To have it at someone else's expense. That is the oldest financial instinct in the human story, and it has never ended well. Think of how many stories of other people in the public ended up that way. Dear oh dear. But here's what I want to say carefully, because the contrast between Tyler and Jerry, it's not that Jerry was morally superior. The film doesn't portray that. It's that Jerry already knew when he had enough. So that's the angle I was watching. And when a journalist asked him how he felt about $26 million winning, Jerry's answer was one word: satisfactory. Not life-changing, not overwhelming, not finally arrived. It's satisfactory, the way you describe a solid day that went roughly as expected. He went home, helped his 6 kids and 14 grandchildren with education, and renovated a house, and went back to nickel and dime poker nights, while Marge, his wife, made everyone chicken pot pie. Marge, if you were in my neighborhood, I would ask you to make some for me too. Now that word stopped me. Satisfactory. Because underneath it is a man who had settled a question most of us spend a lifetime avoiding. Did you hear what I said? He knew when he had enough. Now, how do you give generously when you're not sure you have enough to spare? That's a good question, right? And I asked because I had to reckon with that question myself. Yeah. So here we go. My version had nothing to do with the lottery. It had to do with a mortgage, 2 toddlers, and a calculation that fired in me before I even knew it was firing. You see, my wife mentioned a church she had been affiliated with long before I met her. So that congregation was renting a space and was working towards buying a building of their own. She suggested we make a donation. Right? Because we're going to do this together. And here's the picture at that time. She wasn't working. As I said, 2 young children and a mortgage. But God graciously had provided a solid contract role to me. The income was genuinely there, but the first thing that moved in me was the mortgage arithmetic. How much of the principal could that money reduce if I kept it there? So I admit, it wasn't a proud admission, but at least it's an honest one, right? And I suspect you recognize that instinct. Maybe not a mortgage, maybe a different number on a different table. And a calculation that runs before you've decided to run it. We dress it as prudence. Sometimes it is, yes, let's not deny that. And sometimes it's just the oldest reflex there is. The same one that turned Tyler from a clever young man into something smaller than he started. And here's another verse that I think has some profound impact on people. Okay? And that verse is not the numbers, it's the logic underneath the numbers. And you'll find it in the book of Psalms, chapter 24, verse 1. You'll like this one. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and those who dwell in. The earth is the Lord's, the fullness thereof. I'll repeat that because it's important. Which includes the contract income in my account, the equity I'm building in the house, the skills that secure the contract in the first place. None of it originated from dumb me. I'm just a man. But it came through me, and I'm holding it on behalf of someone else. Thank the Lord. And that changes everything, doesn't it? The question stops being how much of my money should I give. It then becomes how much of his money should I keep. If it's genuinely his, then keeping it is the decision that I need justifying, not the giving. Now, I've known good Christians who sit in that question for years. People who genuinely want to give more and always find a reason to wait. Boy, there's a lot of planes going around above the sky. Now, the mortgage needs to shrink first, according to these people. The kids need to go through the entire 12 years of school. The emergency fund needs topping up. When does it ever stop, right? Those aren't crazy thoughts, because they're real everyday needs. I understand. But if the earth is his, those are managers' thoughts that have forgotten who owns the estate. If this is making sense to you, yeah, please give me some encouragement. Give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share these videos far and wide. Thank you. Now back to the story. My wife and I prayed about it. Yeah, we did give substantial amount, I think, and giving to a church we had never ever settled in. I can tell you, I remember my wife saying the pastor's wife was in tears. So it wasn't polite gratitude, it was tears. Because someone outside her congregation, yeah, had no reason, there was no reason anyone could point to, had made that kind of donation towards a building that they would never worship, which is me, right? Work kept coming, which is great, and family was fine, and that's all I have. Yeah, but here's the detail that stopped me when this story came back to me. I wonder what kind of fruit is this? Is that I have forgotten that I actually donated that amount of money. Not filed away as a sacrifice to feel quietly good about. It was gone the way you forget a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Every day just goes past. It came back mid-sentence while I was preparing this video. And what that told me about my own story was something I hadn't expected to find. That is what giving without attachment looks like. So it's not heroic restraint. You simply release it, it leaves your hand, life moves forward with or without you. It doesn't sit in your account as a debit against God, who you think who owes you anything. It doesn't follow you around waiting to be remembered. You gave it, it was his, it went where it needed to go. I'm going to tell you another story about a man I met. His name is Daniel. I met him a few times. And he explained to me through his testimony that he came through a very dark season in his life. Yeah? He told me he actually met Satan. Okay. Anyway, this is by the grace of God, he was delivered. Delivered from something that had held him for years. And the response that rose up in him afterward was not quite private relief. No. He started buying gospel tracts and then handing them out in the streets, not by the dozen. And that's how I met him. He bought thousands at a time. I can only assume he's not a wealthy man, not from what I can see, and from the conversation I had. I don't know exactly what that cost him each month. I only know he keeps going, week after week, arms full, out into the streets, because he has concluded, as completely as a man can conclude anything, that what he received is not something he can hold on to alone. No. He already has the only jackpot that matters. Amen. And that is where I want to land today. Because we have been talking about lotteries and loopholes and roll downs and what happens when greed gets hold of a clever person. And I want to say something plainly to anyone watching who hasn't yet made this decision. If you're a Christian, if you accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, well, I'm here to tell you, to declare you have already won. I've won. Not metaphorically, not as a nice thought to comfort yourself with. While the God who owns the earth, the fullness thereof, the world and all who dwell in it, that God looked at you and said, worth it. 100% worth it. Because he sent his son, his only son, to die in your place so that you could be called his. That, my friends, is the jackpot. Everything else, you look at my life, the contract income, the building, the roll down, that is the loose change. And a loose change is a lot easier to hold with an open hand when you know what you're actually holding. So let me tell you about Psalms 24 verse 1, right? You can hear it differently this time. Not as theology to agree with, as the ground you stand on every time you sit at a kitchen table with a number in front of you and a calculation firing before you've decided to run it. The earth is the Lord's, the fullness thereof. Hey, Jerry called 26 million satisfactory and went home to chicken pot pie. Daniel was set free and sends the good news out by the armful. My wife looked at the mortgage and 2 toddlers and a husband doing arithmetic in his head and said we should give to a church that we won't be settling in. My friends, if you already know you've hit the jackpot, what exactly are you holding on to today? Well, it's been fabulous being with you. This is Louie saying to you, Happy Easter. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.